Holding very still. Just observe. Those of you in the Zendo, please gather in front of the altar. Thank you. And those of you on Zoom, please turn toward your computer screen. And thank you. First of all, thank you, all of you, for helping with this, not only participating in this community by practicing together and studying together, as you do sometimes every day. Some of you, we have studies going on daily of one sort or another. Some of them just meditation alone. Some of them studying concepts, ideas, teachings around the Buddha's Dharma. Also, thank you for your help financially. It's been great to have that help, not only with the community as it shows up every day and continues to proceed along, but also with the Community Mindfulness Center, which we are still trying to establish so that people in this community can come in that would normally come into a monastery, but would come into a place where mindfulness is offered. And that's what we want to set up, an environment that would provide a space for that. So please help us if you can, and thank you. This evening's Dharma talk is titled Expectation. And I didn't know what I was going to talk about until Senchu told me a story about what her son Rumi had said to her. And I wish she was here, because I don't think I did it. Can anybody tell that story that's heard it and tell it the way Senchu told it, word for word? You could? Is Senchu coming? I thought she was coming. She's coming. Maybe we'll wait a little bit, and if she doesn't show up, then you're on. So, but it's a very nice story where I got the title for this talk. Expectation, to talk about it directly, this is the subtle form of expectation works in one way. The obvious kind is, we expect things to happen, and sometimes we know that way ahead of time. We do something and we expect results. Should we? Probably. It's a relative situation we're living in. We have to live in the relative world. We have to have our feet on the ground, and we need our heads to be in the absolute. Because if it's not, then you'll continue to think that you have say-so and control about everything, and you do not. You have some. I can pick this up and look at it. I can turn it over. Big deal. I have control. But you fundamentally don't have control. Not fundamentally. So expectation is a second noble truth. First one is, of course, life is suffering, as the Buddha said 2,500 years ago, and that is that comes about because we want something else, or we expect something else. You'll notice that you might not notice that you even have an expectation when something you were just expected was going to happen, and suddenly it doesn't happen. You expected there would be this, and this, and it just doesn't happen. And what happens then? Suffering. Suffering because one is not willing, does not have, when I say willing, does not have the awareness to see deeply here, not the thinking process. There's only a certain amount of depth there, and it is very valuable depth, and we need to make use of it. You want that kind of depth? Read the 30 verses of Vasubandhu 50 times. That's depth. Even the translation out of the Sanskrit, if it's a good translation, which there are a few, powerful depth of thought, how to think deeply. The very word for meditation in Mandarin is deep thinking. I think I have that right. I don't remember the Mandarin. Yuhun, can you tell me what that is? Deep thinking in Mandarin? I know she's there somewhere. So it's okay. So the expectation creates the disappointment that we thought this was going to happen, and it does not. It just does not happen the way we wanted it to happen. We do not get our way. We want things to be a certain way. It doesn't show up, and because we misunderstand the fundamental nature of relative truth. Samvriti Satya, there's the two truths, Samvriti Satya, Paramartha Satya. Relative truth, absolute truth. Fancy, it's been studied for centuries and centuries, otherwise it wouldn't be showing up in Sanskrit. So it's powerful teaching, something you can look into. I'm not about to expound on that. What I do want to talk more about, though, is just how our expectations become more apparent as things in our environment, in our family, in our nation, in our culture start to shift and go other ways. We thought this was going to happen, and suddenly the way you know that you thought otherwise is it doesn't show up. And as you've heard me say a few times, and I'll say again, it's about being aware of that. It's not about not having expectations. It's about being aware of what those are, aware of the structure of that, so that you are not continually blindsided by it. You actually see that there was a disappointment. And what do you do with the disappointment? You don't necessarily go in and charge around in circles with some kind of blaming finger pointing at this, and it's because of this. Well, if this hadn't happened, if they hadn't said this or done this, and so on, that there could have been some kind of better outcome. No. It's very difficult to understand relatively, but it's impossible to miss ultimately. Train your mind so you can see what this is, so that you can be this wisdom. You can see this yourself, so you'll stop fighting with your mind, biting your nails and biting other people's nails if you get close to them. So difficult because we make things difficult for ourselves, and then people come around us, and then we make things difficult for them. Wouldn't have to be that way. You could actually just be fundamentally present in this present moment by seeing the way you keep involving yourself in past and future, expectation of what's going to happen. Nothing is going to happen. And if you think it is, this is the very nature of the thinking process that leads us into something else. Something needs to happen. We need something else. Passion. Sometimes showing up with the intensity that it can even be called greed. In some people, it's so incredibly advanced and debilitating, and it is such a disease of the mind that the individual doesn't even know, is not even aware that they're operating out of chaos. They think it's clarity. They think they're right. Still no sensu. Okay, you get to tell the story. Can you tell the whole story?
I'll try my best.
Okay, so this is where I got the title of Expectation, although I went a little bit different direction with it, but this is a great story. Don't screw it up, okay?
Okay. Senju was making Rumi's lunch, and
Rumi will be 6 in November. So he's very young.
she packed him a tuna fish sandwich and a banana and some carrots and a Larabar. And she showed it to him and she said, "Rumi, how does this look?" And he said, "It looks good. Well, it looks as good as I can expect it to be."
If it's not funny to you, then probably because you just don't know Rumi. So he is a very, very intelligent little fellow, young man. Good as I can expect it to be. You don't expect that to come out of someone talking about expectations, someone that young. Speaking of expectations, it works the other way. You don't really, you'll notice that if you are, shall we say, how can I say this so it will help you understand rather than give you some kind of a formula. I don't want to do that. Sitting meditation is all you need, as far as I know, and then studying the concepts of the Buddha's Dharma. But expectation can also lead us into things that we didn't expect, that were our surprises, are very uplifting and are very positive. So those also come along. You'll notice that the closer you get to a fundamental understanding of what this is, the less you'll be surprised by anything, and the less you'll be disappointed by anything. Because you'll begin to, over time, slowly see into dependent origination. If you're still getting disappointed, like Rumi, well, I guess he wasn't so disappointed though, was he? Or if you're getting totally shocked or surprised by certain things happening, then continue to practice, continue to sit, continue to look closely at what this is. As His Holiness the 16th Karmapa said just before he passed away in 1981, nothing happens. He didn't mean that just coming through space and dropping on a table doesn't cause a happening or a sound. What he's pointing at there is to say, that's unreal. So from the point of view of what this is, nothing happens because it is an illusion. That's a hard one, isn't it? Because everything seems so real. The emotions, the thoughts, the memories, the events, the situations that come up, what someone said, what someone did, what was going to happen, our expectations, and it didn't come about. We lost the job, or we lost the account, or the sale, depending on what kind of work you're in. Disappointing. So I'd like some questions on that. There's lots of room to go into that. Yes, sir.
So are you saying if we see deeply, we don't have expectations?
No, I did not say that. I'm saying if you see deeply, that you'll see that the expectations are based on illusion. So they may still show up, but you'll see that it's unreal. So the expectation, the cause and effect, it's not like if you see what this is, suddenly you're just delighted all the time. No, the expectation can still be there. You still have the same karma that brought you into this realm. In your case, 35 years ago, was it? 34 years ago. You're younger than I thought, or than I remembered. More? Good area to question, and if you haven't, go ahead.
So if we see deeply and the expectation isn't met, do we still suffer?
The suffering, thank you for going into that, because the suffering you cannot, nothing is consistent because it's dependently arisen. So because it's only consistent if you can pick out some part of dependent origination we call karma. This flies through space, runs into something else, and creates a third thing. Not this, not that, but sound. That's a very simple cause and effect situation that most of the world runs on. If I do this, I'll get that. If I do this, I'll get that. Or if you do that, I'm going to put you in jail. Constant chatter around that reinforces that part of the consciousness we call, or I call, ego, and it is commonly called the seventh consciousness, or the klesha mind, that part of the mind that thinks there's a problem, that is paranoid, that buys into right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, and the very simple form of karma we call cause and effect. But there is no cause. You cannot find the first cause. There is no source for what this is. It just looks like it. More. Let's keep right on going in there.
Choosing buying. So if we see deeply, there's expectation that isn't met and suffering arises. You're saying that happens without any cause and effect?
I'm saying that the cause and effect that happens there is too complicated to sort out as far as what happened here and what happened there, because the non-duality extends to the illusion of time and space, or this and that, or this happening over here and causing that over there. That's an illusion also. The illusion is very, very extensive. And these words are coming, these words are an illusion. There's an illusion talking and an illusion listening. Self and other. So to take it a little further, I think this is where you're asking about the suffering may still occur. It's dependent upon who it is and what kind of chemistry of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect is behind your particular lifetime or your particular day of the week. And all the other causes and conditions that are countless, just countless, that's an understatement. But what will show up as the suffering may show up as an item, so to speak, but there will no, the identity, if you understand what this is, you see what this is, then the illusion can still persist in some forms. But even the illusion of a separate self can persist, but you'll see it's unreal. So therefore, there's no one who's suffering. There's just the illusion of suffering. This has been pointed at. This is not something I invented last week or 3 years ago. This is something that the teaching I ran into a long time ago and began to look at and contemplate with the help of my teachers, and eventually understood it enough to even comment on it, or to actually respond to your question in such a way as to say, nothing's real, nothing actually occurs. This hand moving is unreal. There is no hand. There's no one perceiving that hand. That is the illusion. But it's not something you think your way into and figure out and conclude, because conclusion is also tied up with the fundamental part of the illusion we call duality, that you can't conclude anything. If you do, then you're deluded, which may be okay. You can still go to bed and get up in the morning and make breakfast and operate in the delusion as a living being, which is also unreal. As it says in the teachings, you have to save all beings is the vow, but there are no beings to save. It's always a conundrum of sorts. More. No. Pretend we're in the Hojo. Let's keep going.
Jews unbowing. So is the intention just to bring awareness to the expectation and the
Yes.
suffering?
Just please, thank you. Yes, that's the intention. And that's why we bust our buns to do this. That's why we have a monastery. So we have these walls. That's why if you come in here just about any time of the day, somebody, maybe a dozen people, but somebody will probably be in here practicing, meditating. And if they're not here, they might be in retreat. There's usually somebody in retreat most of the time here from this monastery, solitary retreat. Yes, the idea is awareness. We strengthen, for lack of a better word, strengthen the awareness so that we can see more clearly what is coming and what is going, so that we can eventually have a deep understanding, which is wisdom, which sees that nothing actually occurred, that it was all completely unreal. In the midst of the intense emotions and feelings, you'll still have the intense emotions and feelings. The third noble truth of cessation, or nirodha, does not mean that the suffering will come to an end, though some people teach it that way. They can do whatever they want. It doesn't mean that happens. What happens is the grasping, the fixation, and the belief in duality. The belief that there is a person that's suffering, the belief that there is suffering. Those still are there, but they're illusions. So you don't have to get rid of an ego. You don't have to get rid of suffering. And as long as there's nerve endings of the three types of pain, the pain of pain, that's unlikely to recede much at all, because you still have nerve endings, so you'll still have the pain of pain. But the identity part will have come apart and seem to be just a concoction based on what? Paranoia and fear. Fear of being abused, fear of being taken advantage of, fear of not being respected, fear of death. More. Good start, go ahead.
Audubon, can we have expectations of the teacher?
Probably can. Do you have expectations of the teacher?
Probably do.
So again, to go back, and I understand what you're saying, but it's not about getting rid of the expectation. It's just noticing that you expect this and you expect that. You expect certain things to happen in a certain way. So we're dealing with that. We have forums here. We have SAMU meetings. We have structures. We have the certain way that things are to be, certain forms are to be observed inside the, say here in the Zendo. So we have expectations. When someone doesn't, say, live up to or follow that expectation, then it's becomes situational. Then is that a time when we say something to that person? Or is it a time when, because of the nature of that, might be better in that situation to let that go for a while, or maybe talk to them outside of the Zendo? Well, it's very much situational. We're not getting rid of our intelligence here. We're actually going to be clear about what is happening and see that, as it says, the title of Suzuki Roshi's last book, I think that was published, is called Not Always So. That's just a teaching he gave that I think someone liked it and put it on the title of a book, because he never really published any books. But not always so. You can't find anything that's always needs to be that way. So that's why you could say every situation is going to involve a different combination of things as far as observing a form or setting up a form, but we don't obey them, we observe them. We observe them. More, go ahead.
What if the disappointment in our teacher or in Sangha is so intense that we feel like we need to do something because we can't handle, or we can't, it's just too much pain?
Okay, so what do you want to know? Because I heard the question and I know what you're talking about. Disappointment in the teacher, let's go there. That happens over here. People get very disappointed in me for not functioning, for not living up to their idea of what a teacher should be like or should be doing. A lot of people are disappointed in Trungpa, even an outlandish teacher. The justification is he's a crazy wisdom guru only goes so far. Some of the stuff he did was very bizarre and I did not approve of it. But he was my teacher, and that doesn't mean I think that everything he did was correct or right. I have no idea what kind of karma he was dealing with personally. He was lucky to even get out of Tibet alive, let alone come over here so he could help a few thousand people work with their minds. More?
What about it? It seems like that would result in intense, painful disappointment in your teacher, who you are,
With
following.
me?
Yes,
With
with
me?
you.
Well, I'm not sure what you're pointing at or what you're asking about then. I might have missed your question. More?
Just seems like some people.
Be more direct with the question if you're asking me. I don't know. You started out to say, it seems like some people, so I'm saying, I know about some people. You have to ask this person.
Are there times when we have to step away from Sangha or from the teacher because of the intensity of our disappointment?
Yes, you may have to do that. Everything's dependently risen. There's no correct way to do anything. It's just so very, very situational. Not everyone's going to be a monk. Not everyone's going to even receive the lay precepts. Not everyone's even going to meditate. So the whole world is doing the best it can with what shows up in front of each person at the kitchen table or in their job or in their family or in their health situation. It's so complicated. We're very lucky to be in a situation where we can study this teaching that goes back 2,500 years that just is basically saying, rather than fix or repair or push or pull or shut down or open up or push away or paint it a different color, rather than do that, let's just look at what it is. Let's just sit down, hold still, and just call it meditation. Just look at your mind for weeks, days, months, years. This has been going on for much longer than this lifetime. I have no proof. I don't need proof for anything. I don't need evidence. Evidence is a lower level, when I say lower, not judgmental, but it's just a lower level of way of working with things. You have objects and things that go this way and go that way. But if you see what this is, that's the proof. That's the evidence. You actually see no separation. You don't believe it as a concept. And so how you work with this is going to be different. And you could get very, very, very disappointed. I was disappointed in my Zen master. The way he was treating for years, I was disappointed in him. I'm so disappointed that I just stopped even thinking about him. And then until I as I've told this story probably a dozen times by now, maybe more, I just one day I just realized what he was pointing at. And up until that time, I thought he was just being mean or disrespectful or whatever. I could go on and on about it, but he was not. He was teaching. As soon as I gave him permission to be my teacher, he began to teach me, and I immediately was thrown for a big loop. So big I just couldn't understand it. Is that the area you're talking about? It was very painful. It was so painful I would just stop thinking about it. I went into retreat for 2 months. Part of it was to get away from that feeling that I was being rejected by him. Go ahead.
Well, Divine, so if you had been living in his community and he was ignoring you, how would you?
He wouldn't have done it in that community. It would have been a different dynamic. There's no way you can say, well, if, there's no way you can do it. It was the situation as it was. And I don't think you can shift things around and say, well, if you'd been in a bigger house or if you'd been driving a Ferrari instead of a Porsche, you can't, I'm being a little silly, but I'm saying you can't really do that. That's the illusion that things are separate things that can be shifted around. It's worse than that and it's better than that. It's worse than that because you can't figure this out. I don't care how many, I don't care about the relative stuff. You can't figure it out. But what can you do? You can see the truth yourself. And if you do, you'll be completely alone. You'll have no one patting you on the back. You won't need anyone patting you. You won't need anyone telling you, I think you finally got it. Even you don't even need feedback from your teacher. Because you see it. And you realize that you're not even separate from the person who was pointing at that. Maybe even 30, 40 years before you saw it yourself. You just see it. And you realize that which you're seeing and that which is being seen are not separate from what your teacher was seeing and teaching. Not separate, not two different things. More.
Well, Divine, it seems like all I can do is ask how to handle the fire when a fire is too intense. And it's situational.
Well, it's situational. You can back away. Go visit your mom. I mean, literally. Sometimes Trungpa Rinpoche used to make fun of people who would take breaks from the Dharma, but I don't think he was saying that you should go a different direction if you're having great difficulty in some area. I would say you could do that. We see it here all the time. We have people who are here and come this direction and ask me about going somewhere else for 6 months or a week or 3 days or something, doing something else. I don't think I've ever said no to anybody. I appreciate being included, especially if someone's a monk. More? It's a good area if you have more. It's hard to ask questions in that area, and it's quite difficult to respond in a way that could possibly be helpful to you and not just create more circles for you. Junchu told the story of, what's his name? Rumi. Yeah, his expectations of, how did that go again? What was his statement?
I asked him how his lunch looked, and he said, "It looks great." Well, as good as I can expect.
As good as I can expect. Yeah. Now, don't ask 6-year-olds questions. They're not prepared for that kind of an answer. Is there any questions on Zoom? If you have some, please. Adriana.
Adriana bowing. What does it mean to refrain from intoxication?
So that's the way you ask the question, I would just say it's about being aware of that situation. It's about the awareness, not about the control part of it, because you may get some control that may work for 15, 20 minutes, could work for 10 years, could work for quite a while, but the fundamental understanding needs to be seen. There are, even in the Buddha's Dharma and various sanghas, there are 12-step groups and so on that work with that. And I'm not against that. I'm not trying to promote anything over that. Maybe a person could get some help with a kind of addiction in that area. But is that what you're asking about, addiction?
Yeah, I'm wondering what is intoxication or what counts as intoxication. Bowen.
So anytime you take something in that clouds your understanding of what's in front of you, what's showing up in your mind or in your life. And it could be anything from drugs to alcohol. It could be Prozac. It could be Wellbutrin. Because, I mean, I could say, if I wanted to take a position on it, I could say, and I have done this with students, if they're very close students, I've said, you might want to set the Prozac aside for a few weeks, get permission from your therapist or your psychiatrist or whatever. But as your teacher, you might want to set that aside so you can experience the negativity that you're covering up with the Wellbutrin or with the Prozac. And I always make it, I said, it's just a suggestion. You can continue to do whatever you want to do. It's just something you could play with a little bit. I don't think the whole thing would fall apart for you necessarily, but maybe it needs to fall apart. So is there something else in there that you want to ask about, possibly?
One more. Can a person or a situation become an intoxication? Bowen.
I think we can become habituated or intoxicated by any kind of activity. I mean, even going out and playing racquetball, going bicycling as a way of kind of covering up things. If we have some anxiety about something, some people go out and jog. And actually, we'll even call it meditation or call it, well, my meditation is jogging. And is that wrong? No, I think that's, they need to do that. Maybe that's how they need to work with their mind. My parents, not to put them on the stand necessarily, but drank their whole lives, and that's how they work with their difficulty. They worked in a factory, and they drank quite a bit. They didn't live very long, but they weren't. I remember once in the 1950s they referred to somebody who was a friend of theirs I remember the mother saying, "Well, he's alcoholic," and I remember asking, I says, "What is an alcoholic?" And I must have been like 13 or 14. He says, "Well, it's somebody that can't hold their liquor." So that's my first definition. So, well, of course, later on, technically, I kind of found out that they were habituated to alcohol, so they could have been categorized that way. I don't think they would have done that, but seems to be different with each person too. Yes, sir.
Shandy and Bowing. Can there be hidden expectations that we're not aware of?
Yeah, so that's I meant to say more about that sometimes we don't know that we have a hidden expectation until something we just took for granted was happening a certain way, and then suddenly it's gone. And then we realize that we expected that to have some duration to it. Our health is one thing. We just expect that we're okay, and we get up every morning and we don't spend much time contemplating the four reminders, or death comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. We need to be thinking about that, reflecting on that. So when that does happen, there's a little bit of preparation for that. Did I get close to what? Is there more?
Yeah, Shandy and Bowing. It seems like there's an amorphous expectation that something negative or bad is about to happen, or something.
Oh, you mean
it's hard to penetrate.
Paranoia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how to look at it if it just seems like an amorphous expectation.
That's, you said it, just look at it. But look at it not just intellectually or thinking about it or fretting on it or worrying or something like that, but do it with consciousness and through sitting practice of meditation. Not that you won't still fret or worry or have some paranoia, but something about the sitting practice of meditation gives you, and this is not something you can get a credential, you can't really prove this, but it gives you a kind of foundation in the consciousness that where where you can actually receive those parts of the illusion, paranoia, any other event or non-event that occurs is unreal. And it gives you the ability to see your whole life as more dreamlike, getting closer to ultimate bodhicitta, or as it says in Atisha's 7 Points of Mind Training, remaining in post-meditation, remain a child of illusion. So you're in it, you're living it, you're having expectations, having disappointment because of expectations, but there's still a dreamlike quality to it. Takes a while. Seems to take a lot of sitting meditation for that to start to show up, and it's different with each person. Anyone in here? Sendo? Come on, you guys. I mean, ladies. Go ahead, young lady.
You're bowing. If we have an expectation of how someone should act or something should go, and it doesn't happen that way, and then we flip into anger, should there be an intention to maybe return to the disappointment?
Maybe a little to look at what you're saying, the trigger for the anger. A little bit. I wouldn't make a project out of it. It would be different with each person. It would be different with each time, how many times that's happened to you, and if it's starting to cut a groove in it. And that situation is if there is starting to be some fixation in the anger, then rather than leave the anger to kind of return to a more neutral state where you're still being triggered, but still somewhat neutral, it might be better to just look at the density, the thickness, and this smelliness of the anger. Actually, because if you can do that, then there's less likelihood, not that you wouldn't be doing it, that you'll be outflowing out of the anger onto someone else. They might look at you and think, "Are you upset?" You might say, "Somewhat," but you wouldn't necessarily turn that into some kind of sarcasm or something. It would just be information. They would ask you for information, you give them the information. You don't have to hide anger. If you try to hide it, then it goes, or try to suppress it, or you can't do anything with that. But you can be genuine. You can be the anger you're trying to, as I often say, be whatever you're trying to get rid of. Just be that. So, because if it is true that ego is unreal, then by just being the anger, then the ego has to deal with that, and the ego starts to come apart when it realizes it can no longer spit fire on anybody. It's the spiritual path. You can do that. This is called compassion. It's not very recognizable because there can be a lot of anger there. There can be a lot of frustration, but it's compassion when you're actually willing to be responsible for your emotions. Extremely hard to do when someone next to you has just done something that ruffles your feathers. Not that you're a bird. More?
Aren't you bowing? It seems like if I am angry and I'm trying to be responsible for it, there's still a quality of something building to a breaking point. What am I not seeing?
You're seeing it, you're just adding to it. The building part is an addition. It's thinking about it, and also being worried that it's going to overtake you, and that's the very nature of ego, is to think that it's in danger, think that it's going to be overwhelmed, or think somewhat what Ondo was talking about, needing to get out of the building, out of the environment, away from the teacher, away from the trigger. So it may need to do a little bit of that, but you don't have to go completely away from it. You could, if you're a practitioner, if you're a student of the Buddha's Dharma, then you'll know that everything that happens in such a way that it can be a teaching for you. Doesn't mean it'll be comfortable, but if you can do that, it's very hard, but just receive everything as a teaching, even if it didn't come directly from the teacher. Maybe it came from your partner, maybe it came from your mom or your dad or your neighbor or someone else. But if you can be a student, then goes a long way to being able to just live in the world in dependent origination, even though you still have a lot of belief in the illusion. Don't have to get rid of the illusion. That's because just see that it's not true. Simply said, and difficult to see.
The intensity of the anger seems like it might be harmful to our physical health. How do we not become a martyr to it?
Here again, I'm pretty biased in this area. I'm saying sitting practice of meditation. And is there someone somewhere who knows this more clearly than I do and might say, no, not really that. You need to do this or this and this, perhaps. But the way it looks here, and I'm the one you're asking, so I need to respond out of what I've been looking at for half a century. And I would say, sit still, watch the movement. And when I say be responsible, the only thing I'm saying is not take the blame. I'm not in line with the teacher's 7 points of mind training and all of its teachings. Drive all blames into one is not particularly one that I would promote. In other words, taking the blame for everything. I don't know how workable that is. That just seems to create more self-centeredness. But you can just see what arises. Don't push, don't pull, don't shut down passion, aggression, and ignorance. And observing how you can't quite do that is that erodes the foundations of ego, which is belief that there's someone who can be offended or someone who can be harmed. What is fundamentally real and authentic cannot be, is totally not threatened. Until you realize that, then there's things that are lurking around the corner, or people are going to say something, or what do they think, or when is my partner, something like that, going to say something or do something, or am I going to do something that is going to hurt my health? All of the paranoia that comes up in the form of talking to ourselves. So it's about what? Not about stopping that, but it's about seeing that you can't stop it. This is the way the ego finally, I don't know if I'd call it concedes, but it just runs out of power because it gets its power out of belief in the illusion. Belief that it can do something about it. Probably not. More.
Could sitting be a form of torturing yourself?
Sure. I think you can do anything, just about anything could turn into that in some way. There's dynamics that maybe could happen, but I think, if I'm talking I'll use your example. If I'm talking to somebody that's sitting and it's really, really painful for them to sit, in other words, it sounds like they're being tortured or something is happening when they're sitting, when they're just miserable, then I because I'm talking to them and because I have some experience sitting, quite a bit of it, I know what it's like to feel terrible when you sit, and so I might change their technique a little bit. I have even in the past, not often, situationally told people to stop meditating. And if they say, well, should I mean forever? Or I said, no, just stop for a while. We'll talk about it. Let's talk about it in 2 or 3 weeks or a month. No rush for anything. Nothing is going to happen. It's just an amazing understanding. And if you don't understand that, then you can't teach out of that understanding. You teach out of trying to fix people. And as I've said, occasionally, sometimes I say this, it disturbs people and they all start shouting at me. They don't shout, but they send me texts. They get a little upset if I say it doesn't matter what happens. But I mean that from the bottom of it. It doesn't matter. What does matter, save all beings. Put others before yourself. Other people are suffering as much, maybe even more than you are. Put them first. And that doesn't mean sign over your checking account to them. It just means that consider when someone mistreats you or treats you in such a way that's harmful to you or offends you, consider how much they're suffering, and that might be the only way they can get rid of the suffering is to, for the next 10 minutes, just not dump it on you. Difficult. But yes, you could feel very uncomfortable meditating. And I would say, you've been meditating for what, 8, 9 years, something like that. You would certainly know yourself if you should back off on your sitting a little bit. You're already sitting, I happen to know you sit many hours every week. I don't know how many, I don't add them up. 10, somewhere around that. It's quite a bit. You can also change the shape of it. Sit a little bit in the morning, a little bit at night, a little bit at noon, so it breaks it up in lots of parts. Several ways, we've talked about that before. Different ways. So lots of different ways of approaching it and kind of sneaking up on it. So you don't have to torture yourself. Go to a mountaintop and be isolated and drink water and eat nettles. Don't do that. More. So, friend.
Sokuzan bowing. I notice when I have intense emotions and I go to work and I sit in front of another person, it's as though that intensity is completely shrouded and gone. I finish the session and I don't feel that anymore. Is there a way that I can practice with clients that includes the spiritual path as opposed to a path that appears to be just hiding from myself?
So, do you think you're hiding?
I feel like it's fishy that there's such a contrast of feeling really bad and then suddenly feeling very good.
Well, didn't you just spend a half an hour helping someone?
That was my intention.
Well, do you need that explained to you?
Yes, because sometimes you say that the helper identity is something.
It's not true with you. But with some people, it's the helper identity is where all that energy goes. So you don't function in that way. That's why it's necessary to have a teacher, because otherwise those kinds of things get, as long as ego is holding forth in some subtle way, thin as onion skin. If there's any kind of self-centeredness there at all that is believed in, then it's very hard to, that confusion, the obscuration of what is actually true and what is actually false, the confusion between the two conflicting emotions about the nature of what this is, will hold forth and will continue to push on this and pull on that. So all you have to do is continue to function. You're doing exactly what you need to do. It's just that when you're on the side of the mountain and you have a blindfold on, it's hard to tell where you're at.
Sokuzan bowing, are you saying that if I were to intend to help somebody and that the emotion would, that the anger or the negativity goes away, that is the type of, can I regulate negativity by intending to help people?
No. No, but just if you're having difficulty and you start to turn your attention over to somebody else who needs help and help them, and you notice when you're through doing that, your negativity is not there, there's no guarantee. That may never happen again. Cause and effect are an illusion, a powerful one, because we can't see the cause of any given thing. Nothing has a primary source, except the phoenix, of course.
What is the primary source of the phoenix?
Ashes. Comes out of the ashes. Everything is burned and gone down. The phoenix rises. Also an illusion. So all you have to do is continue to work in your the practice that you do as an acupuncturist and as a practitioner of Chinese medicine, and continue to help people. Don't look for results. When I say don't look for them, if you do find yourself having expectations around that, just be aware of that. but you don't have to hammer them down, try to get rid of that situation. You don't have to fluff them up or enhance them or turn away from them. Passion, aggression, and ignorance, again, always about awareness, never about what shows up in the awareness. Very simple statement, and yet we're completely flummoxed. I don't often use that Sanskrit word. By just how we feel and what's happening and what will happen next, and paranoia. So are there any questions on Zoom?
Mahesh Bhavan.
Mahesh?
So once you see your true nature, does greed, hate, and delusion, do they arise? Bhavin.
They could. But if a person sees truly what this is, there may be a landslide of karma behind that may still need to show up in the consciousness. It probably will not, if it's greed, it probably will not activate a hand that grasps. Probably not. I would say, I'm not saying that couldn't happen also, but more than likely it'll just be the greed, the desire, the intense grasping will show up in the consciousness, but it will not make it to the actual grasping part. It'll show up as the emotion of wanting something, of absolutely wanting something with great passion. But that will just be in the karma of that particular individual, and it's not separate from any other individual. Have you noticed that if you're around one person, you feel a certain way, and if you're around another person, then every person you meet affects how your own particular subjectivity or your dynamic. If you had some kind of solid ongoing identity that was couldn't shift at all, you wouldn't care who you're around. You'd be totally secure in who you were. You'd know who you are. You don't know who you are. And where are you getting your identity from? Causes and conditions, success and failure, right and wrong. Where does this person get his identity from? I don't have one. Don't have an identity. And if I do, it's unreal. If it shows up, if passion shows up, if anger shows up, if jealousy has shown up here in the last couple of days, but it can't find anybody who's jealous. I don't know how else to say it to you other than that. That's the way I often say it, and I'll say it again today. And if this causes you to be more confused, then you should come to me with some questions about this. I might be able to help you. But you will not care how you feel. That doesn't mean you won't have intense, negative, positive, neutral feelings, but you will not be concerned because you have a deep understanding, a perception that everything is dependently arisen. There are no separate things anywhere. This separation is the illusion that is deluding you or me or us. See if it'll stay there. Unreal. Unreal, unreal, unreal. You can do this. Next time you open a can of beans, maybe you don't eat beans, but maybe the next time you chop up some asparagus or you pour a cup of coffee, as soon as you look, that's unreal what you're doing. Is so vivid, and the coffee is hot, the cream is just spilled out on the counter, and you wipe it up, and that's unreal. It's an illusion. See it, you can see that, you can do this. If you see it, and you see it, and then you see it, and you see it, and you see it, eventually it's just ordinary. Within a couple of days, it's just ordinary. It's just, everything is unreal, but it's ordinary. Tamo Geshepa is a Tibetan word for that. They saw this centuries and centuries ago. Tamo Geshepa. Yes?
Yudalban, if you don't care how you feel, does that mean you won't ever try to change how you feel?
There's no guarantee. You can't find a way to navigate dependent origination as long as there's any kind of pushing or pulling on the illusion. You can't navigate it. This is why the way I teach it is to just observe. In this way, there's a possibility, no guarantee, there's a possibility you'll see what this is. You'll actually see what it is and realize that all the nerve endings, the sense of seeing doesn't produce any sights, sense of hearing doesn't produce any sounds. and on, right all through all the sense fields. And I would even go so far as to say, though you may not agree, and you don't need to agree with me. You don't need anybody to agree with anything, but the sense of thinking does not produce thoughts. You do not produce thoughts. There isn't anyone to produce thoughts. It just feels that way. Very convincing, isn't it? To walk down the street and think about things and think that you're somebody thinking. What have you been thinking about? I don't know. What have you been thinking about? What do you think about what I've been thinking about? What you're thinking? I don't know. What were you thinking? Well, I'm going to tell you that. You know what I've been thinking. Yes, go ahead.
Divine, so when you tell us not to add to our thoughts,
I do.
are those dependently arisen?
You can't help but
We don't
add to
have
them.
Control over that either.
You can't help but add, when I say don't do it, I know you can't help but do it. But when I say don't do it, that puts a little bit of kind of microscopic tension on that, so you can see more closely that you don't have any choice there. Thoughts are just dependently arisen. They're coming out of the whole cacophony of otherness, of belief that there's something else. Sometimes this is called, in the Yogacara tradition, this is called the eighth consciousness. And there's all kinds of incredibly complicated, and I wouldn't even go so far as to say clever explanations of how that all works. I spent some time today asking, what was I asking? Is it called AI? Yeah. I asked him a bunch of questions about Yogacara teachings, and I had to correct them a few times. And they apologized. They said, "Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. That is not, you were not asking about Sri Svabhavanadesa. You were asking," and then we went on and on with lots of fancy words there. I don't even know what I just said, but it was quite a bit of fun. And it's interesting that it can get confused. Like I used the word, what was the word I used that I thought I said glacier? Klesha. I said, how about the klesha mind or something like that? But I was doing it by speech into the, what is that thing? What do they call those, smartphones? I was saying it and it misunderstood and thought I said glacier mind. And what did it do? It made up a whole teaching around glacier mind. Because it's artificial intelligence. That's what I mean. You can have some fun with that. If you go in with some strong idea about what you're talking about, it will deal with you on that level. Why? It's artificial intelligence. That's artistic fish. Sorry, that's not as funny to you as it is to me. Thank you so much for your attention, for your kindness, and for your questions. I appreciate it very much. Let's continue to help all beings, save all beings, help others.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o-san, shi-fu, shi-son-gu-sa, moko-sa, SokukoJi. The 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. we'll take a 5-minute break to reset the Zendo before evening service.